The charter of the Directory having given us only privileged electors, the councils could only represent the proprietors who had named them. It is less surprising then that after the mass of the nation should find itself in opposition to this imperfect representation, the audacity of which increased every day. It drove the government to the last extremity. It had already taken from it, with the direction of the treasury, every pecuniary resource, and there remain only two: organize the National Guard of Paris as planned by Pichegru to assure the fall of the Directory. We had now arrived at a political crisis which left us only the choice between illegality in the counter-revolution. The illegality of the 18th Fructidor saved the country. Hoche had caused several bodies of troops to approach Paris. Napoleon had thought it sufficient to send Augereau with the menacing addresses of the army of Italy. The national representation was violated by a coup d'etat, and nearly the whole of the nation applauded the proscription of 200 of its deputies. The majority of the Directory, Hoche and Bonaparte, united too. The legislative minority accomplished a melancholy duty, but the absolute duty of a citizen in not respecting the inviolability of the majority of the councils, because the inviolability of a chief or of an assembly does not require them to betray with impunity the object of their political mandate. Instituted to maintain a republic, the councils, in seeking to destroy it, cease to be inviolable. Insurrection or a coup d'etat is a natural right in such a crisis. It is a double right of public welfare and individual defense. Pichegru, recognized as a traitor to his country and conspiring with foreigners, had seduced or corrupted the majority of the legislative chamber. That chamber attacked the republic which it was charged to defend, and from that time the coup d'etat and insurrection were right, just, legitimate, necessary. Sad necessity, without doubt the most melancholy of all political necessities, but a necessity justified by right and duty. It is giving a senseless extension to the inviolability of an assembly, not constituent, but constituted. And we may condemn the 18th Fructidor. They approve, even of principle, when it is considered that inviolability has for its limits the order imposed upon all legislative assemblies. Thus the nation and the army celebrated the 18th Fructidor as a day of triumph. The hope of Austria was baffled, and the peace, which was suspended by the plots of the royalists, was signed at Campo Formio. Unfortunately, the coup d'etat of Fructidor was not submitted, as it ought to have been, to the vote of the nation. Still more unfortunately, the severity which recalled the days of terror dishonored Fructidor, and an atrocious banishment condemned the vanquished to live and die in the deserts of Sinnamary. Napoleon, conqueror and pacificator, arrived in Paris at the end of that year. The Directory gave him at the Luxembourg a triumphant reception, of which all our historians have repeated the details. The public mind was so exalted that the government could not avoid feeling some inquietude and ill-concealed mistrust. What Frenchman remains calm in reading upon a great banner which was presented in that solemnity to the army of Italy, that inscription without a rival in history, either ancient or modern? The army of Italy has made 150,000 prisoners, has taken 170 colors, 505 pieces of siege artillery, 600 field pieces, 5 bridge equipages, 9 vessels, 12 frigates, 12 sloops, 18 galleys, armistice with the kings of Sardinia, of Naples, the Pope, the Duke of Parma and Modena, preliminaries of Loban, Convention of Montebello, with the Republic of Genoa, treaties of peace of Tolentino and Campo Formio, liberty given to the people of Bologna, of Ferrara, of Modena, of Massa, Carrara, of Romagna, of Lombardy, of Brescia, of Bergamo, of Mantua, of Cremona, of a part of the Veronese, of Chiavenna, of Bormio, and the Valtelline, to the people of Genoa, to the imperial fiefs, to the people of the departments of Corsica, to the Aegean Sea, and Ithaca sent to Paris the chef d'oeuvre of Michelangelo, of Guercino, of Titian, of Paul Veronese, of Correggio, of Albano, of the Carraccis, of Raphael, of Leonardo da Vinci. Triumph in 18 pitched battles: Montanari, Milsimo, Mondevi, Lodi, Brighetto, Donato, Castiglione, Rovereto, Bassano, St. George, Fontana's Nova, Caldera, Arcola, Rivoli, Lefebvre, Tagliamento, Tarvis, and Neumarkt, engaged in 67 battles. The peace of Campo Formio had thus acknowledged in Italy the Cisalpine Republic, of which the finest province of the Holy See formed a part. The Republican spirit in Romagna and the papal legation soon communicated itself to the rest of the Roman states. Joseph Bonaparte, ambassador at Rome, employed his influence to maintain the public peace and followed with address and firmness the pacific instructions of the Directory, but nothing could stop the Republicans of Rome, and the insurrection broke out without commendation or support. The insurgents, repulsed by the troops of the Holy See and by a furious multitude, took refuge in the palace of the ambassadors, where they pursued them without respect for the diplomatic jurisdiction. My brothers sprang forward to endeavor to put a stop to the confusion, and the brave General Dufault, who was at his side, was struck with a mortal blow. The ambassador quitted Rome and hastened to Paris. We had at the time nominated him in Corsica member of the Council of 500. The General Berthier received orders to invade Rome, which was constituted a republic, and, like Milan, Amsterdam, and Switzerland, wished to imitate the dictatorial constitution. That political imitation was the natural result of events. Napoleon had been desirous of introducing some changes in the Italian constitutions. He had proposed to give more strength to the Cisalpine Republic by reducing the 5-3 directors, but that proposition had displeased the French government, who insisted upon the general's abandoning his project of concentration. The general obeyed with regret. He had also in vain demanded that Sieyès might be sent to him, that he might aid him in his constitutional improvements. He thought that these essays of legislation applied to the republics of Italy might hereafter be applied to France, when experience had proved their advantages, and as soon as he could manifest his opinion without failing in his duty, he did it openly. Genoa had not been conquered like the Cisalpine mistress to give herself the laws that she preferred. The counsels which she asked of Napoleon were a pledge of confidence, which left him entirely at liberty. Also, without the intervention of the Directory, and notwithstanding the contrary order executed at Milan, Napoleon decided at Genoa the establishment of 3 magistrates instead of 5. There arose against him very unjust complaints. The general had given his advice and obeyed a contrary order. An individual consulted by a free people might and ought to have given that counsel which appeared to him to be the best. Napoleon, after the 18th Brumaire, in speaking to me of the 3 consuls and their relative powers, recalled to his memory the laws he had given at Genoa. The Directory, said he, instead of complaining of my conduct, ought to have profited by it. My opinion and my example proved my sincere desire to serve them. It was in vain that I showed them the route that they should have followed. By concentrating that might have manifested themselves. At that period, 3 magistrates equal in power were probably capable of governing well. But now, after all our reverses, that concentration is no longer sufficient. Of the 3 consuls to be established, 1 alone ought to have the power, or we shall have nothing permanent. In recalling this anecdote of Brumaire, I do not in the least mean to prejudice the question that we are to discuss hereafter. I cited it here only to show that Napoleon, before his departure, desired the consolidation of the Directory, and that it did not depend upon him, that the government did not fortify itself after the example of the Italian republics.